Alright, let's get back into it. This is the next scene in the animation. Right off the bat, things might look a little different with these eggs that were previously rigid bodies. I guess they still are technically. After baking the dynamics, you really, this is super helpful and something that's been absent from other modeling software that I've been familiar with, at least in the past, where once you have your thing baked, your physics baked, you can go down here, and in rigid body, you can bake to keyframes. And this is really helpful if you need manipulating things, if you need things to stop and end at a certain point and didn't set that with the end here. And it's just really helpful that you have that. It makes exporting really easy. It's something that I think gets swept under the rug or not mentioned sometimes. It took me a little while to figure out. But anyways, once in the animation, these are at this point, you can see they disappear over on the collection view. They disappear from the render, and they end up getting replaced with new rigid bodies for these cracked versions. And the way I made these is it might be a little hard to reproduce, but I have this egg crack object, which is just a solidified ring of verts that are like going up and down in a cartoony zigzag with a bevel and solidify. Let me turn on screencast keys with a bevel and a solidify, and then if you can imagine that the egg shape is here, I used a boolean to cut into those, and then a lot of manual cutting and selection to kind of get to a point where they aren't perfect. You can see there's like a little bit of issues with the shader, or with the shading, where there's like n-gons and stuff, but it's pretty close. It's kind of as good as it's gonna get for something like this. Quick and dirty. So these cartoony eggs fall. It's again just a matter of getting comfortable enough with the rigid body setting to kind of get things to kind of collide in a way you want them to collide. And they're bouncing on this. The camera kind of bounces because now this is being constrained to these broken eggs rather than the solid ones. So let's go ahead and open up the next one, which is called Ice Hatch. This is the next one that has something else going in. At this point, start over at 360. This is another big reason why you want to be rendering out frames and not rendering out a video, is because you can kind of start and stop the rendering process if you need your computer for other reasons, and you don't lose any progress. So here at frame 360, once everything is still, that's when these two eggs kind of launch out from. They're coming from behind the wall. And obviously they should be coming from inside the eggs, but that's just kind of the way I wanted it to look. It's a little cheesy. It's simpler than having them come out of these. And for what I was going for, this was enough. So here we go. Let's go into these little guys. These are Metaballs, which if you haven't seen those before, they're just objects you can add in here. Down in Metaball, there's a couple different shapes, and what's fun about these is you can scale them and move them around and control their properties here, but given their proximity to other Metaballs, they'll start to glom together, and that is kind of what I wanted to do for these. I didn't want some sort of fluid simulation or particle things that seemed like it would take a long time to dial in. So I just keyframed these different Metaballs at different places, and like with the camera, these all have a little bit of noise Some of them do, I think. Yeah, they have a little bit of noise on the X and Z. Some of these are active and some of them aren't, but that's that. Um, they're both all, ultimately both groups are controlled by this helper that is also keyframed to kind of control that like jumping arc and the speed of it. And the yolks are using the same kind of like, these are just basic spheres, or I think they're rounded cubes technically, that are just kind of like manually placed into like where I kind of think the center would be. That's it for differences in animation for this scene. Now we can go into shading. You'll notice that these are mixed shaders and not just solid RGB values. That'll become important in the next video, but basically all this is just like a shiny BSDF with a little bit of subsurf. Nothing too complicated. The alpha is down a little bit, and the transmission is up a little bit. Transmission is just kind of like how much it's reflecting the scene, and alpha is just how transparent it is. That's like necessary for making glassy and reflective and transparent stuff. Not a lot that's noticeable with the yolks. For the whites, the white parts, that's again, it's pretty much the same material, but with the transmission and alpha up and down a little bit. So they're a little more gooey, a little more transparent, and a little shinier. That's really it. Pretty simple, pretty convincing look. If you go back into the camera view, you'll see with the animation, these just kind of like hop out from behind the wall and just kind of like float to the end. That's it. That's it for this section of the animation. As you can see, we're kind of, these, you know, I could have done these as simulations, but felt like it would be faster, and for the cartoony look I was going for, this would be good enough. Alright, so there's the composited scene. If we look at the compositor, there's really not anything too different going on. The only difference is there's a new render layer. It's called Eyes, that just has the eggs in it. And you can see because of the alpha of the material, a little bit of the fence is poking through. This is just sitting in between the fence and everything that renders out in front of the fence. So won't really get too far into this because I feel like you guys already get the idea so far, and it's gonna start chugging because there's a lot more going on. As you can see, depth of field is in full effect with more stuff in front of and behind the target for the camera. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and move on to the last part of the animation, which is a completely different scene with different objects in it. Okay.